Hello, Kyle here again, and another part of GoG's guide. We're going to go over the types of variables, as this series on variables is going over all ends and angles of them. So I thought I'd explain the variety of types that come along with this topic. Now to start off, variables have some different types, some complicated, some not. I'm going to go over some of them, however I don't plan on explaining them yet. We'll get into that later. Just want to give you guys an example and brief introduction so you'll know what's coming up. So to start off, let's go to our first variable type called the integer. You might have heard about this in math, an integer value. Well, an integer is a whole number, and whole number is positive or negative. So it's a positive or negative number, no decimal, keep in mind. And on 32-bit systems, if you don't know what a bit system is, a 32-bit, you may have heard it on a download program, for example. That's another topic, but on a 32-bit system, the range of an integer is as displayed here. You can go to, I'm not going to try and check what exactly this number is, but it's a very large one. You can go this far negative, this far positive. Picture a number line. And oops, I got a color scheme performance there. I'm going to keep the current color scheme. Sorry about that. I'm not quitting the video for that. Anyway, you go negative or positive in that range. If you were to exceed that, however, you'll either get an error or else your integer will be turned into a different value. And I'll explain that. It's coming up later in this video, actually. So in 64-bit systems, you can have a range of, whoa, look at this, look how big this range is. It can be negative or positive, the same number, however, it's pretty widespan in difference between the two, like I said, in a number line. And 64-bit system, quite clearly, can handle a larger number range. So if you're using that, if your server, like that's running PHP, is using that, you'll have a larger span for an integer value. Anyway, to move on to the second one. String. A string is a series of characters, and believe it or not, you've already been using this quite a lot. Hello world, for example, where we echoed this out in one of our first syntax videos, you print hello world to the screen. That's technically a string. It's string data. It's put between single or double quotes. It's any series of characters that are used and manipulated. It's just, that's the data, ASCII values. Next are doubles. This is a little bit more complicated, however, you'll be familiar with this too. Decimal, pretty much. They're also called floating point numbers. Any number with a decimal point, after you see that little dot after the number, if there's numbers following that dot, it's a decimal, and you can then call it a double. It's professional, it's the programming term, it's known as that across languages, all programming, floating point, double, you name it. And here's another type, one that we're not going to discuss fully yet, but called Boolean. And Boolean is named after, I can't remember the guy's name, something Boole, who developed it. It holds either the value true or false. It's a type of logical explaining in which you have those two values, and it may seem pretty self-explanatory. True or false? Oh yeah, well, something either is or it isn't. It gets pretty advanced down the road, though, when it comes to decision-making, for example. Everything comes down to true or false when you think about it. Like, break down your problems. But, like I said, we'll explain that further on. Just wanted to open your eyes to that. And our final one is called Null. This is an interesting little variable name or variable type if you're not familiar with it, but Null is pretty much the sideline variable type that represents nothing. And I don't mean, like, it literally represents nothing, not an empty variable, but it's the space taken up if you declare a variable but put nothing in it. So if you make a variable called pizza and you put equals but it doesn't equal anything, it's instantly going to be declared as null. So another example is if you made a Boolean, and well, I'll explain that later. Don't want to get too complicated with Booleans, as I said. But one thing that is possible on some machines is if an integer value, as I stated back a bit, where the range of integers, if that goes out of its range, you could end up with a null value, or you'll get a really weird E plus thing. So a variable such as this, you can declare a variable as being null too. You don't have to put nothing in it. The professional way is to put variable equals null. All capital letters is preferred, but I don't believe it's case sensitive. I would use all caps just to be professional. And as I said, you'll result with null if you have to, if the variable has nothing in it or it has to resort to a value that you didn't supply. So anyway, we're going to move on now to the variable rules and conventions, as I'm sure you all like rules, but we're going to have to supply it with some. And stuff may seem a little bit boring and irritating, however it's very useful. Develop your programming experience. Let's move on. Aha. And, oh yeah, derp on my part. One more thing. Yeah, it have nothing except null. There's my point. I'm talking fast. Let's go. Yeah.